Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Arvind. Um, I think the main thing as a solo developer is, we were not a solo developer. Just to give some context, we had one person working on the development since. So my point was, you need to look at what skills you have and what skills you have, and double down on that, right? Like focus on what skills you have, work with that, and then see what is missing. So, for example, in our case, we had programmers in the studio, and we were talking to another studio about this idea, right? So it was all about collaboration. We worked with a studio called Circus here in Hyderabad, and they were taking care of the art side and the animation side while we were doing the programming. But when I say we, it was basically one programmer, like you said. The whole team of Potrods was one team member. So I would say like collaboration is a great way if you're a solo developer. Sometimes it is hard to do all of the things, art, design, programming, everything that's related to gaming, right? But collaboration is one way which works, and the other way I would also say is if you're good at something, if you're good at doing art, I would say like double down on that. Like work more. There's a lot of options now with YouTube tutorials, online courses that specific like Unreal, for example, also gives a lot of help in courses, right? So all of that, I would say.
So I guess it's really like you play by your strengths
Yeah.
and understand your strength, and
Absolutely.
then reach out to other people when on things that you're not good at. I guess that's great.
Absolutely.
Like I think that myth of just working by yourself is nice, but I think you still have to collaborate. Bad news, introverted game developers. You still got to work with a team, I guess. So which then okay, you have a team, and this question is to Ganesh. You have a team, so you kind of to kind of build upon what Gautam was talking about. You had a team, you kind of started making this game, and there's clearly a lot of talented folks in your team. So can you and how do you can you elaborate specifically on the technical requirements and the engineering best practices when it comes to deploying a game, and especially like deploying a game to cross platform?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Cross-platform
Keep it
making.
slightly closer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, when you intend to do something as pervasive as cross-platform development, the first discipline that complains usually about being super ready and the plan being bulletproof is obviously engineering. Uh, but the good news is all the heavy lifting can be done is done by Unreal, and you just need to be smart about how to go about it. So there are two features that I would like to touch upon. There are a lot of other things, but these two are usually pain points. And if you keep these two features in mind right from development, taking your game to different platforms, say PC, console, even mobile, becomes a lot more easier down the line when you are ready to, say, go through the compliance checks of that platform. So first is obviously the UI part of it. And in UI, there are again a couple of things. So first one is the iconography. So games require input, but they have different keys and different icons that need to be displayed according to, say, if you are in menu or if you are in a tutorial. And those icons definitely need to change according to the game platform. So it will be a different icon on the PS5, different icon on the Xbox, and different icon on the Switch. Uh, and another thing that you need to be really careful about UI is focus management. So when it comes to platforms, what happens is there are events like, say, controller disconnect, which can happen again at any point of time. Uh, Picture a scenario where you have a menu active and your controller disconnects. So obviously, the controller disconnect platform needs to be shown on top of the menu. So you need to be careful about how you stack your focus management. And I'll talk more about that in the engineering best practices. Uh, and apart from UI, the next thing that is very critical is presence. So what I mean by presence is achievements, stuff like your avatars, friends list, leaderboards. Uh, you because gaming is a very social usage of time now, right? If I'm playing a game and if I have a friend on the same platform who's playing the same game, I'm very interested in what level of the game is, on, or what kind of achievements he's already done. If it is a multiplayer game, I would want to play with him. So I would have to invite him, which again is a combination of the platform's UI, your own in-game UI. Uh, and yeah, so these two features, if you keep in mind right from the very early stages of development, it becomes a lot easier when you approach platform submission. In terms of best practices, I'll again stick to these two features. Obviously, happy to take questions on any other features if you guys have them. So in UI, like I said, focus management is a big deal. So your widgets, your buttons need to be able to manage their own focus. They need to be very generic, and the stacking needs to happen correctly. Uh, and it is easy to do if you start early. For iconography, it could be a simple data asset to be used in blueprints. Uh, and when it comes to presence, again, every platform has its own interface. Unreal provides you the interface. There is an interface, for example, for achievements. So you need to use those interfaces really well. Another thing that can make this really a one-time effort is you can have this as a plugin. So all your UI things that you need to do for uh, keeping cross-platform development in mind, you can make it one-time plugin that you can just use across projects. If you are really particular about the software architecture of your game, you could even have it as a subsystem. And there is even a smarter way to do this. You could use a very generic service like the Epic Online Services, which gives you this, which means you don't have to maintain your plugins or your subsystems, just use the Epic Online system properly. It is available both in C and in C Sharp. So it is something that can save a lot of pain down the line when you need to support cross-platform development. And the last one from me is amongst the best practices. It is very easy to set up builds for different platforms within Unreal. So when you want to support cross-platform, make sure that you have your build systems maybe based off Jenkins, and just push out platforms builds at will. Within the builds also you have possibilities like debug builds, which allow players to so testers or players to test out different features depending on all the information that they need. There are test builds, and there's obviously the shipping build. So yeah, these are the things that would help.
Thanks, man. I mean, typically when you are doing game development and you mentioned continuous integration using Jenkins and all of that, a lot of folks, including myself, find that to be a fairly cumbersome process. Even to maintain the build, the build machine itself is cumbersome. So maybe like a quick one-liner, do you, what is, how do you measure the worth of having a CI pipeline? Like how do you measure the worth of maintaining a build machine?
So
Just quickly, yeah.
in terms of the value that it brings to team, the entire team, I think it is pure gold, because you have a lot of disciplines working together who need to be able to check what they are working on in an instant or on a very regular basis. And maintaining a build machine is not a big deal. It's just a one time setup. Uh, what really helps is if you are building from source in Unreal. So you just hook that up in Jenkins, obviously type in the command, have different jobs for every platform. And once the jobs are in place, anybody can kick the builds off.
Absolutely. No, I think it's just a general note is having these build machines has been incredibly helpful. A lot of folks don't invest the time into building these machines, but I think, like Ganesh said, it is of great value. So let's then move on to, okay, so we asked Goutham about what are the resources, what are your strengths, and then Ganesh obviously talked about how to build for cross-platform. So let's get to Samhith then. So you are making a horror based on Indian mythos, and it sounds terrifyingly, amazingly awesome. And I think we all want to play that. So, as an indie developer, what was your motivation to publish to PC console? Because everyone gets to be on mobile. But, so, how do you go about deciding what engine to use, and how do you decide for this market or whatever your market is, console and PC?
So I founded the studio with the idea to make games for PC and consoles. I've been a PlayStation gamer for my, as so I've been a console gamer for throughout my gamer life, right? So obviously, when the company started, we didn't have opportunity or technologies to have big looking games that have that kind of scope to be developed with like four to five people. That was not the case, and the opportunities we had were mostly mobile games in India. So we kind of had to build a lot of mobile games. We did great games, and at the same time, we had a team that was set up in such a way that we did a lot of R&D to make sure that at one point we are going to build these games. So fortunately, I've been tinkering around with Unreal in my engineering college days. So I'm a C++ dev. But when this company started, we didn't do any Unreal development. But when we decided to make this project, the go-to engine was Unreal. There were few specific reasons why we chose Unreal. One, we have the source code, which is very important. Me and one of the developer, we have another developer in Turkey. He contributes a lot to the Unreal Answers community. He's been highlighted in the community spotlights a lot. So he loves to have source available. So we usually, that is one of the core reasons. At the same time, as a studio, the art team was very familiar with Unreal Engine. So we knew that there was a team that was capable of using Unreal Engine. At the same time, we are targeting PC and consoles.
So just continue that question. Like if there's an audience, folks, someone over here who wants to create a PC console game,
Yep.
What would your advice be to them in terms of, I'd say, a business motivation? Saying like, what is the business motivation for you to have a PC console game?
Business motivation in the sense, making PC console in the current environment is very passion driven. You need to have this opportunity. I mean, you have very little opportunities to make games from India for these platforms, because we are not known for primarily having consoles as the a lot of user base here, right? There are good numbers, but it's not the same with other countries. So my suggestion is, if you are someone who's keen on making a profitable business, make sure you have like a you are that person with skill, and not someone that is going to depend on someone to make the game, right? So you need to be that dev or the artist, or you need to have some sort of core skill in the game development department, and from there you can build a small demo, and then see how things go. But in terms of business, I would say you need to have a publisher or some kind of backing to make sure marketing is done right. If not, it's just a drop in the ocean and you're just forgotten the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a nice segue to my next question to Nikhil. I think everyone I talk to wants to play GTA in Mumbai, and I think you're precisely making that, which is Mumbai Gullies, and it's a massively ambitious project, which obviously needs a sizable investment to get going. So, from that business angle, how do you pitch such an ambitious game to an investor, and what's your plan to reach a very wide audience? Because obviously you need to make this a very big success in order to, I guess, recuperate.
Okay. Hello, dosto. So thanks a lot for inviting me on this panel, and thanks for the mega grant as well.
Yeah, mega grant. Yeah, mega grant.
Yeah. Okay. So just to add to Samhith's point, from a business perspective, I think the advantage of making a PC or console game is that their barrier to entry is relatively higher, and you have lesser amount of competition. You're not just competing with any random person now, you're competing with the best of the best. So you have to be the best of the best. That's one business motivation for anyone. And let's say, for example, you're able to make a good game, let's say for, like something like Raji, then you can, if you ship out 1 million units and it's a paid game, then there's a huge amount of profits that you're looking at. At the same time, if you don't make a good game, you'll be crushed.
As with anything, yeah.
Yeah. So now, how do we convince our set of investors? That's the exact pitch. A higher barrier to entry, lesser competition, and of course, it brings a lot of investment from our perspective in terms of hiring the right set of people, and it is very expensive to hire Unreal devs. So we'll connect later on how we can find out more Unreal devs. But it's a simple thing. Whatever you're investing right now, it's either going to pay huge returns or you're going to go bust. So that's a clear pitch to investors. Either we are going to be the best of the best, or we will be forgotten. What was the later part of the question?
Like, how do you plan to reach a very wide audience? Because
Yeah.
you got investor will obviously want to get their money back.
Correct,
Yeah?
correct. So as Samhith said, we definitely need a publisher to make it big. We know from our end that we can pull this off. A lot of people over here might have already seen the demo. We are still in the pre-alpha stage. So we are talking to publishers right now because although the game is being built on the city of Mumbai, the target audience is the global audience, which is playing games like Grand Theft Auto, Mafia. So it's a mature audience that we are looking at. So while it's a game that is being based in the city of Mumbai, it's being built for the global audience, and that's the reason why we need that publisher firepower in order to tap the right set of audience. So yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like a follow-up question, I guess, to what you talked about. You mentioned about hiring Unreal talent and whatnot, and I'm sure you're building a team and you continue to grow. So, if there's how do you vet talent? Like, if there's some amazing developer over here, how do you what do you tell them that what are you looking at when when you're trying to make Mumbai Gullies?
So firstly, for Unreal talent is relatively difficult to find because a lot of people are now making that switch from Unity to Unreal. That's one. I think personally, technical skills can be picked up by anyone. You guys are also building an amazing community, so that part is very much sorted. But something that me and Vaibhav vibe a lot on is the kind of attitude that these individuals carry. So there needs to be a hunger for them to learn. It is okay if you don't know everything. Like even sitting over here, I don't know everything about AAA games, but we are making.
You know everything, I know.
We are trying to learn, and that's what we are looking at in our candidates as well. They need to have that hunger for whatever doing, and a lot of passion for playing games as well, because that's an integral part. And that's just from the development perspective. We can go on and on about the other departments like HR and all. But just from a development perspective, we look for hunger in terms of learning the things and how passionate they are about the project itself. Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. Yeah, I think if anyone wants to work with any of them here, I think you should be playing a lot of games. And that's a nice little advice I kind of like to like that, right? If you're going to be making a movie, you need to be a movie watcher. And similarly, if you're going to be making games, you need to play a lot of games. Don't listen to your parents. I didn't say that. All right. So, which kind of game comes to Hina? Congratulations, all of you, for having won the Mega Grant. And you obviously won the Mega Grant because your game is, of course, in early stage development, but it clearly generated a lot of interest within Epic. So, what's your motivation behind the project? Because we talked, like they all talked about, we have to make a massive game. We sell 1 million units. It's going to be amazing. But yours is more niche, right? It's to a specific audience. So can you talk about maybe talk a little bit about your game. Who is your audience and how do you plan to reach them?
Thanks, Arvind, and thanks everybody for having me here. How many women here in the audience or non-males in this audience? Can you put your hands up? Yeah, so I feel like this room is sort of the microcosm of the gaming world, the gaming community. There is very few women, but it's a growing number. And imagine the potential of doubling the number of women who are in this room right now next year and doubling it further every year. And that was possibly one of the motivations for coming up with Ladyland. So the story begins 120 years ago. A woman called Ruqayya Hussain wrote a story, and in that story she described a world called Ladyland. And that was a world that was equal, it was full of nature, abounding with nature. And it was a place where those who were previously excluded were now running the country, the city. And so the inspiration of that becoming a sort of a film is what we were talking about, because I'm from film, I have a film background. I've never made a game before in my life. And but then we were looking at the potential of Ruqayya's vision and how do we take it further from a passive storytelling format, which is a film, but to make it more interactive and to make it for a newer audience. And the idea of a new audience in the future storytelling seemed to be about inclusion. More and more as we looked at what was also working in the world and how I read a study that 74% of gamers really care about climate change. And statistics like 18% of gamers in India are women, and that number is growing all the time. And so the idea was to find something that women would like to play, because I've been a gamer in the past. I felt excluded because I couldn't go into video game parlors. It was full of men. And I, of course, to be honest, I played a lot of FPS games and I enjoyed them for a while, and then I ran out of interest in them. But I felt like when the lockdown happened and I started exploring again what was there in the gaming world, I realized that there was a potential for story games, for soulful worlds where you want to spend time. Simple games like Celeste, where you just want to just be there because the story is so interesting and so involving. And so it looked like now it was a good time to bring Ladyland 2.0 out to the world, which would be a game which was a interactive space, and it was working on multiple levels, like you said, cross platform. So it's not just a PC game, which I will explain a little bit more about what the PC game is, but also there's a larger metaverse idea where you can log into the web and actually be in this world and spend time there, build it, help design it. And because all of us here are people who are trying to look at how to design a future, right? That's what gaming is about also, and game making is about. And a very important quote that I read early on was by Monica Bielskite. She coined the idea of protoverse and protopia, and in that she said that those who make the fantasy make the future. Those who imagine the fantasy make the future, and that became the driving force of Ladyland 2.0. So the PC game is really you enter the game as Kai. You don't know what has happened. There's been an incident. You enter this world. It's beautiful and it's full of nature, but it's a city. It's a futuristic sci-fi city, and you have a camera. You have a phone. It doesn't work as a phone anymore because that's really archaic. It's a future city. Phones don't work anymore, but it works as a camera. And you're a story picker, and you go out there and you start picking stories with these amazing, crazy group of characters. And as you pick stories, the complexity of the game increases with levels, and the complexity of the camera and what you can do with the camera and the lenses gets better and better. And so eventually you uncover a secret, and then you become part of this community. And so parallelly, of course, there's the mobile game idea, there's, inside the bazaar, and there's, of course, the larger idea of the protoverse, which is where anybody can come in.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, and I'm really looking forward to playing this game because it reaches a wide audience through this cross-platform, and it also enables interaction and social, I guess, social interaction through this kind of a multi-user interface. So it's incredible. So thank you for making this game. We're all looking forward to it. So on this kind of a niche audience part, or I wouldn't say niche audience, but a niche subject part. Let's go to Vaibhav, right? Once again, congratulations on the mega grant. So your game Mukti has been creating waves. It's been talked about so much, and it deals with human trafficking, and it deals with survivors of human trafficking. And this is an important story to tell. Similar to how there has to be a lot more game developers. Obviously, we want lot more awareness created about human trafficking. And I'm sure you faced a lot of challenges making it, and it's still in making, right? So for folks who are out there who want to make such a game, and I've been, even last year during the Shorts Film Challenge, we had folks who were wanting to create an experience about manhole cleaners. So it's a horrible job to be in, but people were still doing it. So for folks who want to make such a game that is creating like a societal change and create awareness, what challenges would they be facing, and how should you navigate it? And then how do you also make sure that that subject or that game reaches the masses to create this kind of awareness?
Firstly, thank you. Thank you for the mega grant as well. Also, thank you everybody for being in this room. I think there are two types of developers. First ones are the ones who run behind, and it's not wrong. It's the standard way of doing business, where you actually do a lot of research on how you're gonna make money out of that product. That's how you start, right? Like you analyze the market, you figure out the subject, you figure out the mechanics and all that stuff. These are the smart developers, I feel. These are the people who create businesses. The second category are the people who are crazy about ideas something that they want to do just for their own satisfaction, right? I believe what I'm doing with Mukti is the second thing. Also on this stage, I guess I'm the only one who is, focused on a non-commercial angle towards this game, because completing this game is going to give me the ultimate satisfaction, not making money out of it. Why I feel this is because there are few, like everybody is, like every game developer, when he starts building games, right, he starts getting into this storytelling aspect, right, and he comes up with his own ideas and own things. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter if you're, if you have a kick-ass idea, you want to make it, but it's not commercially viable. Mukti is that game for me. Like few years back, I made a game on a pet who has been abandoned by his owner, and he's waiting there till his owner comes back. It was a game that I designed, which was around 1 hour long, but I had to cut it down to 25 minutes because the people playing the game didn't stop crying while playing the game. I published that game. I put it on Steam. It was downloaded by I think 2,000 people only. But I saw YouTube getting flooded with these 2,000 people playing that same game with their pets, crying throughout the game, and that was the winner for me. So Mukti is exactly same. When I started building this concept, right, I was reading about a lot of articles about human trafficking, which was happening in the West Bengal, northern part of India. And thank you. And I wanted to talk about that aspect. I personally do theaters. I'm a part of theater. I've been doing theater for last 10 years in Marathi and English. I've put in a lot of efforts for 145 minutes play on theater, which was watched by just 200 people, right? So I don't care if I make this game and nobody plays it. I want to put out that word. I want to put out that story. But when you create something like this, something which is so important, so socially, people have opinions about it, you need to be technically very correct on that. You can't put on statistics. You can't put on any of your opinions in it. So you need to be very sure about it. This is one of the biggest problems that I faced. I had to be very correct in all the data and all the stories that I was trying to bring in this game. Like for example, if you touch Indian ethos, Indian cultural aspects, right? If you go and try make something on Mahabharata, right? It's a very, very tough subject to make because only Mahabharata has like 50 different variations, right? Everybody has his own point of view on that. And you can't have one because the 49 of others are going to bash you for that. So you need to be technically very correct when you're making games like these, which are very off subject, which are non-commercial, which are done for the sake of, putting out the message up. So that's one problem that I face. The second problem is obviously selling it to the publishers, selling it to the investors, right? And you need to find people who would be interested in that. That it's a very small or even audience or small people of, interested people who can invest in your game. And you need to really, really work hard to find these people to get your game funded. So these are two main challenges that I found.
Actually, kind of a follow-up question and kind of what Goutham mentioned earlier. It's a game. It's a game that's very important. It has to be made, and of course, success is a very different metric for a lot of people. Some it's money. Some is just making the game and just showing it to the world. But you still need a team, right? You still need to. You can't do everything by yourself. So I think it's a question that's relevant to everyone over here, which is like, how do you pitch your game to developers for them to come in to work with you on this?
Just from like my personal experience, I'll tell you, when I started writing the story, I started figuring out the loopholes in the story. And over the period of 2 years, it's a fictional story, right? But after 2 years, if you ask me the story now, I'll talk about that story in such a way that you'll feel this is a real story, right? You need to be so good at it that there's no flaws in it. And it starts becoming a real story for you. And it becomes very easy for you to convince it to other people. Because when you lie, you need to figure out what you're lying. But when you talk truth, it just comes out, right? You need to be very polished about your story when you try to convince the people who want to work with it. And for me, it was like bringing the passionate people who are equally interested like me on the project and just do it. And that is why I think I didn't find many, and that is why it took a lot of years to build this.
That's right. Yeah, but I think it's very extremely important. So thank you so much for making this game. And game development is obviously not a simple task, but it's definitely rewarding. So with that, we kind of covered a nice little ground. We started off from where do you get talent, or where do you find the resources, to cross-platform engineering pipeline, to pitching for investors and finding the passion for PC and console, and then creating games that are important for inclusivity and important for creating awareness. So with that, let's get into some, wow, there's a lot of questions coming in. Awesome. So we have some audience questions. To Nikhil. Nikhil, I think you have bribed a lot of people in the audience to ask questions. You have a lot of questions. So Nikhil,
Yeah.
a lot of games with Indian culture remains controversial. I think that's kind of what you're talking about too. So how do you deal with representation of Indian culture in Mumbai gullies?
Yeah, so that's a very excellent question. So, we are very careful about how we are depicting certain things. So, since we are dealing with Mumbai as a city, it's a city of different cultures blending in together. So, it's a question that comes across to us constantly of how we are going to showcase, our Indian gods inside the game, and then the festivals as well. I don't have a proper answer to that as such, but we are trying our level best to make sure that we don't end up hurting sentiments intentionally. But if at all something happens unintentionally, then we just want to make sure that it's just out of the love and affection that we have for the city, and a lot of passion. And we know that there are a few things that we will get wrong, and we are quite open about it. So I think we accept the flaws that we have, and we just have the best intents for the game. That's it. That's
Yeah,
my
I think
answer.
that's about it, right? Like you can't satisfy everyone. I think 50 Mahabharata is probably less, it's like 50,000 probably. Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks for that. All right, next question. This is maybe Goutham, you could take it. What advice would you give people looking to start a game studio? I think it's a question that gets asked all the time to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the toughest question.
Start it.
I think one of the things I think is validate your idea, right? When you start a game studio, one is what is your business model, which is quite the obvious thing, and the other thing is what is the game you're trying to build. In your head, your game is the best game in the world, right? Everyone feels that. You get married to your idea.
No, my game is the best, not your game.
Exactly. So I think start trying to imagine what the world of your game is going to be. What is the scale of your game? What is the scope of your game? Is it actually viable? Like, can you put that much money into it? See what all goes into it, not just your game development, but marketing and the other things that go into making a game, right? It doesn't end at when you make your final build. There's a lot more money you need to put into marketing, into community building, there's tons of other things, legal and other things, right? So think of all of that. But more importantly, I think just focus on that idea and try to get feedback from people, from other studios if you know people, other founders, or if you know what genre you're working on. So try to get more information on that. I would say research.
Yeah, that's good. Like yeah, you got to do your research. You got to believe in your game too, and
Exactly.
so that you can do that. All right, next question. I'll probably throw it to Ganesh. Probably as you talked about cross-platform engineering. So how do you mentioned UI, you mentioned presence, but there's also a question about how do you develop controls that work on multiple platforms, and how do you consider input as one of the elements of cross-platform development, because everything will have different inputs. So how do you consider that? I guess
Yeah. So control schemes for a game are very, very important because that is how players communicate with the game and see how the game responds back. More than engineering, it is a meaning design input is also really, really important when it comes to, designing control systems. And as far as mapping of the keys goes, I think that is pretty straightforward in an engine like Unreal. We just have to have mappings that are relevant to every platform. And the control scheme takes a lot of testing. Design is involved, programming is obviously involved, and if you have a dedicated QA team or whoever is responsible for the testing, that is also that team also has relevant inputs. And these can be schemes that you load on request as well. So depending on what are people's personal preferences in terms of how responsive the input control needs to be, you can save them as preferences. You can have different. So, for example, the PS5 controller, right? It offers different opportunities of input than say other controllers. Again, you need to finalize on what needs. What's the best way that the player can communicate?
Right.
And like I said, it's a multidisciplinary effort. Engineers obviously get it to work, but that needs a lot of user testing, a lot of figuring out how to marry that control system with the mechanics of your game.
Got it. Thanks, man. I think this is the last question. I know we are running out of time. It's probably it's not a question that the audience asked. I am asking this question this time. No, there's all the talk about the metaverse, and Hina, you mentioned about the metaverse, and so there's definitely interest in building real-time 3D multiplayer applications, which is what we have been calling MMORPGs for the longest time. But you have been you come from film, you come from Vaibhav, you come from theater. So for folks who are not entrenched in games, Samhith has been playing games since 1 BC, right? But not everyone has gotten that. But they definitely see this real-time 3D platform in the metaverse as a way to tell your stories and whatnot. So for non-gaming people or people who don't come from a gaming background, what would you tell them? Like, what would you? Why should they bother with this? Or why should they bother with a real-time 3D application?
So it's from pre-rendered to real-time, right, for us? Because once you make a film, it's pre-rendered, and there is no changing it, and that's the power of interactive storytelling, that people can actually engage with the story and make a change in it and see themselves in it, and that's why it's a big deal for inclusion, or for people from marginalized backgrounds to feel like they are part of something and to belong somewhere. And I think that is the important reason why somebody who's not from inside gaming would come in here, because it really provides access.
Just to maybe tweak that question, saying, what would you advise people to be aware of for people who, when someone is a filmmaker and they want to make an interactive application or a game, what would you tell them? Like saying, beware of these things, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the power of non-linear storytelling is what they have to be aware of, because this it's not like A leads to B, but could lead to D, and then you could never go to B, and that's actually something that you learn while you make a game from when you come from a linear space.
Got it. Well, with that, we'll conclude this panel. We have a lot of questions, but I'm sure you're all going to be around. So I would recommend that you directly reach out to the amazing panel that we have over here. It has been very, very insightful, because it went all the way from how do you start a game, how do you pitch investors, how do you nurture talent, how do you make a game that you're just passionate about, what are the challenges that you'd be facing. And I think that covers a lot of ground when it comes to anyone who wants to start making a game. And I hope that they're already inspiring figures, and I hope they inspired you even further to get into your game development journey. I want to do one more plug, which is, if you're interested in learning Unreal Engine, we provide free training. We provide free software, which is Unreal Engine, and the tools around it. There is also free motivation that we are providing. So all of this is free. So all you really need to do is just say, yeah, I want to do something, and believe in your game.
I do want to add that just reminded me that what really helped me in the journey was that I got a fellowship with Unreal just a couple of years ago. And And that really just helped me understand what it takes to really make a game, because the game can just be a concept till you actually start making something. And Unreal makes it so much easier because it is, there are so many things that you can actually just plug and play and use it to your ability. So my ability was not like what people have here. It was really just storytelling and narrative. And I could use that inside Unreal to be able to, on my own, make something, which was a beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. The community is extremely important. The friends that you're making within the community is extremely important. We recently relaunched the communities in various cities. So we had Bangalore user group that we had on October 15th. We had Delhi and Chennai user groups relaunched on October 29th. On November 12th, we have Mumbai. I think Nishit, are you here? I just kind of threw out a date. I'm not holding on to it, but yeah, sometime in November we'll have Mumbai. And I've been meeting so many folks here. There's a guy who wanted to have a user group in Jamshedpur. There's a guy who wanted to have a group. There you go, from Jaipur. So there's clearly a lot of interest on developing games, and there's a lot of game developers around this country. And it's all about connecting people. And if you are interested in beginning a community in your place, or you want to join a community, there is a website called communities.unrealengine.com. You can volunteer to become a leader in your own community or join the existing community over there. And with that, thank you so much. Incredibly insightful panel. And I'm hoping to see some amazing games from here. Thank you so much.